The beard is a great sanitary protection to the throat. For purposes of health, it should always be worn just as much as the hair of the head should be. Think what would be the result if the hair of the head should be carefully scraped off 3 or 4 times a week with a razor. Those are the words of Walt Whitman, Brooklyn's most prominent mask-for-mask poet. This year we celebrate his 200th birthday, but Whitman's Brooklyn is not too far from contemporary Brooklyn. Facial hair is in, the ferries are running again, and Brooklyn of ample hills, ice cream can be yours if you're willing to wait in line. Today, ever so many 100 years hence, we are still enjoying the sunset, the pouring in of the flood tide, the falling back to the sea of the ebb tide. The Brooklyn Public Library is celebrating this bicentennial with a Whitman sampler of public events, including a beard and mustache competition that was held last week in Fort Greene Park. To tell us more about the event and Whitman's relationship to Brooklyn is the BPL's chief librarian, Nick Higgins. Welcome to Woman 2BK.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first of all, I must ask you a question. What did Whitman's facial hair look like?
Whitman's facial hair toward the end of his life was very much like a sort of like an old benevolent Santa Claus type of beard. He just sort of let it all hang out toward the end. In his early days, the frontispiece of the original Leaves of Grass in 1855, it looked more sort of like a Williamsburg kind of like mostly close crop beard, more fashionable and more sort of in check.
He's so handsome in that photo. It's such a thirst trap. He's like got one hand akimbo and his beard's looking all tight, and he's like sort of glaring down at the reader.
Listen, he's pretty sexy in that photograph.
Absolutely.
He definitely had a posture, a pose. He was sort of challenging, I think, the reader, not only with like his image there, but also with the poetry that you found inside the book. It's really attractive. I agree with you.
So he was born 200 years ago.
Yeah.
How is the Brooklyn Public Library celebrating this event?
In a number of ways. Like, we're sort of like winding down right now, but we had a Whitman weekend where we invited a lot of poets and writers and critics to come in and talk about the cultural legacy of Walt Whitman. Leaves of Grass in particular, we had some people coming in to talk about the cultural relevancy of Leaves of Grass in 2019 America. We had a live reading of public reading of Crossing Brooklyn Ferry across all of our Brooklyn Public Library sites, all 59 of them, on Whitman's birthday at 4 p.m. on May 31st. And we had folks from the community, different poets, writers, local elected officials come in and read this beautiful Brooklyn-based poem into the air. And, of course, the beard and mustache competition.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun button on the end of celebration. So let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
You had several different categories for competitors to enter. There was Leaves of Grass, which was Best Natural Beard. Barbaric Yop, Best Natural Mustache. You also had categories for kids, for teens, for fake beards.
Yeah.
Tell me how many people participated, and you were there. Tell me maybe your favorite of the bunch.
So there were about 5 or 6 people per category, which was a good size group for the show. I don't know if you believe this or not, but the library has never put on a beard competition before.
That is surprising.
So it's a little bit surprising. So we had some help from Coney Island, USA. Adam Reelman from Coney Island, USA, who does his own beard competitions every year, came in to help produce the event. And my favorite actually was this gentleman in the park who was a personal trainer who was just running up and down the monument stairs while we were setting up the beard competition. And we encouraged him. He had a really nice sort of like longish beard, and we encouraged him to join in the competition, and he did just by chance of him being there. And he put on a great show. He sort of like strutted in front of the judges. He made a real show for the crowd. His personality was great. He had a good time with it. And that was sort of like the point of this whole thing, was just to have fun and show the irreverent side of Walt Whitman poetry in Brooklyn.
The gentleman who won the Good Gray Poet Best in Show had a very impressive sort of Whitman-esque beard. What's his story?
His story, that's Mr. Blake. He's actually he's an artist. He shows his stuff in lots of galleries. He did this one performance piece in 2009 called The Gorge, where he set up in a chair and he had someone come from behind him and feed him food. You can all check this out online. But he's a LGBT activist. He came in. He sort of stumbled upon the competition and decided to register. And his beard is magnificent. It's a beautiful white full beard that sort of like comes out over his very impressive sort of like build, and he had a great time with it as well. And in his acceptance speech, he made sure to note that Whitman was a queer poet, and this was on the day of the Brooklyn Pride Parade, and he was so elated to be receiving this prize on Pride Day.
What a great confluence of events.
Yeah.
I wondered if he was maybe a Whitman impersonator, which I don't imagine would be a very lucrative profession, but it was a very impressive Whitman-esque beard.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely, yeah.
And you also had beards were not just for men. There were some women who were both competing and judging as well.
We wanted to make this show all genders, all ages. I think Whitman would have really found that exciting to have everyone be able to participate in a birthday celebration of him in this really irreverent, sort of fun celebratory way.
So talk to me a little bit about Whitman's relationship to Brooklyn. Obviously,
Yeah.
we mentioned some of the poems in which he talks about Brooklyn, where he lived for many years. Why is it so significant to be celebrating the 200-year anniversary of his birth here in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I mean Whitman was born in Long Island, but we're gonna
Forget about that. So a lot of good people were.
A lot of good people were born in Long Island, but we're gonna claim Brooklyn. We're gonna claim Whitman as our Brooklyn guy, as our Brooklyn poet. He lived here. He built houses with his family. His father. He apprenticed at a lot of newspapers here. He was a newspaper man himself. He really hustled. He made it in this emerging city, this bustling city. He fell in love with the urban landscape. And he was a poet, and he self-published his revolutionary Leaves of Grass in 1855 out of a small printing shop, the Rome Brothers printing shop on the corner of Cranberry and Fulton, not too far from here, and churned out 700 copies of this work that no one really ever read, like the first edition, but most people found it to be really controversial. It was described as a farrago of rubbish. People thought it should be tossed into the fire. But this happens oftentimes when work comes out that people just aren't ready for. And he was certainly ahead of his time. And it was born in Brooklyn. It came out of Brooklyn. And the way that he did it was so Brooklyn. He just did it by himself. He set the type himself largely. He advertised for it. He sold it. He hustled. And he believed in it through and through.
So you're the chief librarian of the Brooklyn Public Library, which seems like a really fun job.
It's great.
Talk to me about the elements of your job that aren't just like down in the stacks, like working with books. How do you bring the public library out into the community and invite the community into the library as well?
Yeah, I mean, lots of things. Listen, I mean, we are of the community. We are Brooklyn. We have 59 libraries spread across this great borough. We are the cultural and educational anchors of a lot of our communities. We're an open space. Oftentimes, like bringing bringing the library to the community is very important to us, and we listen to the community about like what kinds of programs and services that we have in each neighborhood. So I think really what we try to do is listen to the community, find out what they want, and do honor by the neighborhoods where we're working because we are part of those neighborhoods. We want to reflect the character and the spirit of those neighborhoods. Some communities want adult literacy programs, and we offer those. We offer multilingual legal services for free in some of our branches. And we also put up programs for people who, individuals and families who are impacted by the justice system. It really is a library that's driven by the needs of the community. And when we're doing really well, not only do we respond to those community needs, but we're also anticipating them. And I think that Brooklyn Public Library, better than a lot of other library systems, can do that because a lot of the people who work in our libraries come from the neighborhoods that we serve. And we're embedded. We're Brooklynites.
You mentioned, of course, that Walt Whitman is gay or was gay.
Yeah.
There's a story that we've been tracking here at 112BK about Drag Queen Story Hour.
Yeah.
And there was a kerfuffle recently, I believe out in South Brooklyn. A community was saying that they didn't want a drag queen to come into their public library
Right.
and read a story that was about inclusivity and gender to young children. What do you think Walt Whitman would have to say about that?
Walt Whitman would be at the Drag Queen Story Hour, I think. But you're right, there was some pushback on Drag Queen Story Hour. And across the country, you'll notice that Drag Queen Story Hour in public libraries are sort of like the flashpoint in sort of what public libraries are all about. It's about responding to and reflecting and respecting the broad spectrum of human experience, celebrating difference, celebrating diversity, celebrating inclusion and access. And not everyone is going to like it, but what's great about a public library is that we have something on the shelves and in our programming that people can choose to accept or not. In a way, we have something in the library to offend everyone.
It's a great thing about libraries that they don't force you to read everything in the library.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
So I do think that Walt Whitman would have come out for the protest in this one particular library where we had this kerfuffle, as you say, and would have supported the idea that we are celebrating inclusion and diversity and acceptance in our communities.
Well, maybe I'll wrap up, Nick, by noting that you don't seem to have any facial hair.
No,
I'm just worried. Maybe we talked a little bit at the beginning about how Whitman was very concerned about people who didn't have facial hair because of the sanitary protection afforded by a beard.
This is true.
Yeah. Have you found that not having a beard are you more prone to illness? Has this negatively impacted your health at all?
I think it has. I think I sleep too late on the weekends, and I probably don't take out the trash as often as I should. I just don't have the energy for it, the fortitude. And I think I'm going to take Walt Whitman's advice and do my best to grow maybe that cute hipster beard that he had in the frontispiece of Leaves of Grass 1855.
Grow a beard, young man. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.